From Edson Barboza to Khabib Nurmagomedov, who is Justin Gaethje petrified of fighting? When it comes to Justin Gaethje, one word comes to mind, and that's violent. The man is an absolute savage in the octagon, and he's not afraid to let it show. Gaethje is the kind of fighter who always comes to scrap, no matter who his opponent is or what the stakes are. He's unapologetic about his style of fighting, which is all about knocking his opponents out cold. What sets the highlight apart from many other fighters is his fearlessness. He's not afraid to take on anyone, anywhere, anytime. Whether he's fighting in a sold-out arena or a tiny gym in the middle of nowhere, he brings the same intensity and aggression to every fight. He's repeatedly proven that he's willing to take a punch, and he's not afraid to stand in the pocket and trade blows with his opponents. Gaethje's willingness to go to war in the octagon has won him many fans, but it's also earned him some criticism. Some people believe that his style of fighting is reckless and puts him at unnecessary risk, but he doesn't care about that. He's not in this sport to play it safe. He's here to win, and he's here to do it in the most exciting way possible. Having said all that, it's important to note that the lightweight champ is much more than just a violent brawler. He's a highly skilled fighter who has spent countless hours honing his craft. He's got excellent footwork, a devastating leg kick, and a powerful right hand. When he's on, he's an absolute nightmare for any opponent, and yet there are some fighters who petrify him. Way back in March 2019, this terrifying fighter faced an opponent that made him nervous to enter the octagon. He'd been watching Edson Barboza for a long time, and he admired the fighter's skill and ruthlessness from afar.
Trying to cut the cage off now. Oh, and a huge body
huge
kick.
Liver kick. That might do it. Another highlight for Edson Barboza!
Hoping that he'd get to face off against him in the octagon one day. When that day finally arrived, he came to experience what it was like to be scared walking into a fight, something he hasn't felt very often. But as he was getting ready to go up against Barboza, flashes of the Brazilian fighter bodying people kept haunting him. At least, that's what he shared with his fans via Twitter. Now, 4 years after they went head-to-head in the octagon, he retweeted a clip from that fight, specifically the one where he put his fears to rest by knocking Barboza out, admitting that he was scared of fighting him that day. But seeing as it was something he'd always wanted to do, he came prepared, and sure enough, he ended up knocking out his biggest challenge in one fell swoop during the first round. Just the fact that a fight that didn't even extend beyond the first round, and winning fight of the night, shows how impressive it must have been. No wonder his fans went crazy when he brought the iconic fight up again. Taking such a trip down memory lane riled the fans up. Everyone had something to say about it, including the astonishing comment that he made. One user recalled it as the kind of fight every fan wants to see, especially the part where they traded calf kicks. You've got to agree with him on that one, and apparently the kicks they shared were pretty famous. Another fan commented that they'd still hear the thud from the leg kicks the two fighters shared in the fight. And yet another fan added, absolutely outrageous kicks on the man, as he sympathized with Gaethje's fear of Barboza. But on the other end, fans were commenting on how absurd that was. They pointed out that he was the one to be scared of. After all, everyone knows how ferocious he is in the ring.
New interim UFC lightweight champion, Justin the Highlight Gaethje.
And so they've every right to believe that, if anything, every fighter should be afraid of him. A fan also added that he'd changed his style of fighting since then. Nowadays, his juggernaut style is history.
Under 2 minutes, what a
my
fight.
Goodness. Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness, he heard him.
Oh my God.
Gaethje with a cracking right.
Chandler is hurt again. Oh my goodness, jab by Gaethje.
But according to Gaethje himself, he's never intended on changing his style of fighting. And interestingly, he's always preferred being on edge during his fights. That's the only way he keeps himself in check. After he'd suffered a few knockout losses back in the day during his UFC career, he admitted that he's afraid to fight at times. But in his opinion, fear is a normal emotion for fighters. Each time he's been knocked out in the past, he's ended up feeling vulnerable and scared. Because of that, he can't go into a fight without thinking about getting getting knocked out, even though that might not be the best thing to do. He can't help but let his mind go in that direction, since it's difficult to completely ignore the possibility. These fears didn't bother him though. They only pushed him to be better. The fighter's comments about fear are really interesting, because they show a vulnerable and honest side of him. The lightweight champ's willingness to talk about his fears is a sign of strength and self-awareness, as it shows that he's not afraid to confront his weaknesses and work on improving them. Another emotion that many athletes can relate to is disappointment, and he's talked about that too. He mentioned his loss to Dustin Poirier.
But he's been here before.
Gaethje nearly out on his feet. Poirier continues to land.
But he doesn't have the wherewithal to clinch.
Dustin Poirier,
goodness.
knockout. Oh my gosh.
Saying that he was disappointed and believed that he could have done better. It takes a lot of humility to admit that you didn't perform at your best, and Gaethje's willingness to do so is admirable. It shows that even the toughest fighters can find it hard to do what they seem to be so good at, and the challenge is something that the highlight loves the most, probably to a dangerous level. I'm thinking about his last-minute bout with Tony Ferguson when I say this, even though he'd vowed to not take any fights on short notice. When Khabib Nurmagomedov withdrew his scheduled fight with Ferguson, he saw an opportunity to step in and prove himself as a top contender in the lightweight division.
And he's probably going to get the decision. Takedown for the All-American for good measure. A live underdog to be sure.
He only had 12 days to prepare mentally and physically, that too in the middle of a pandemic on a severely restricted training camp. He even admitted back then that he was terrified, but he loved it. The man would do anything to give his fans a fight they'd enjoy. Going up against Ferguson would be horrifying on a good day, but he went in, showed everyone a good time, and came out guns blazing. There's one other time he's admitted to having been scared of a fight. Some of his fans would claim otherwise. During the fight that gave him one of his 4 losses, Gaethje went up against the deadly Nurmagomedov, and after he'd lost the bout, fans were quick to say that he'd been scared of fighting the longest reigning UFC lightweight champ. One fan started a discussion on a forum where he claimed that the highlight had been obviously backpedaling. Instead of pushing back and slowing down the Russian fighter's pace, he was disappointed to see that Gaethje hadn't given his all in the fight and had instead feared his opponent. Others were quick to come to the fighter's defense, as they claimed that he couldn't tire himself out by engaging in Nurmagomedov's fast-paced trap. It would have landed him right where his opponent wanted him. And as for the backpedaling, he was going back and forth the entire time as he countered hits. But those who believed otherwise weren't convinced. After all, Nurmagomedov is one scary opponent.
There it is.
Nope, it's on the chin.
There's the tap. Still undisputed. Khabib Nurmagomedov has finished Conor McGregor tonight.
And that's all about who Justin Gaethje is petrified of fighting.